Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam va'ed. Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבר אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב
Please be seated. Good morning, friends, and welcome. Welcome to Temple Israel, those of you who are here in our beautiful sanctuary in person. And we welcome those of you as well who are with us via live stream, whether locally, in California, in Massachusetts, or wherever else you might be. We are so glad that you are part of our community and our congregation on this morning. I'm Rabbi Michael Friedman, the senior rabbi here at Temple Israel. This is a congregation, a community, a space that has been so important to the Wetzler extended family for many years. This has been a location of great celebration, and today it is a location of mourning as well. Even today, there's a degree of celebration, even in the midst of our loss, because we all know that Joan Wetzler, our mother and mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law and great-grandmother and aunt and sister lived a wonderful life. We will hear from her family members and her friends throughout today and in the days to come of so many stories, so many blessings that she brought to this family, to this world. And so on this day, our grief is mixed with joy as we honor and celebrate and say farewell to our beloved Joan Wetzler. Yes, death has taken our beloved mother and grandmother and great-grandmother and aunt and sister and friend. Our world is a bit darker this morning. Joan's family sits in the front row, and as they may be silent, we sense that they are lost in sorrow and lamentation. They've shed tears and will shed more of them. And so, at this time of the passage through the valley of shadows, as our Psalms put it, we ask, oh God, that you hear them, that you be with them, that you accompany them. And to all of you, extended family and friends who are gathered here or on the live stream, or will be with them in the days to come, we also ask that you approach your beloved friends and family with a bit of extra kindness and compassion as you help them walk step by step through this valley. God, we also thank you on this morning. We thank you for Joan's love that brought us together throughout her life and which brings us together on this morning as well. It's a love that death cannot sever, a love that we shared along life's path, a love revealed in the tender memories that we bring to this place. We thank you, God, also for the many gifts of her heart and her mind. For all these and more, we give our thanks to you, God, on this day. And I'm very pleased to welcome Joan's granddaughter, Rebecca, forward so that we may offer some psalms on this morning. The 121st Psalm is a psalm of seeking help. Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri, ezri me'im Adonai osei shamayim va'aretz. Al yiten lamut raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam.
I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian. Adonai is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. Adonai will guard your going and coming, now and forever.
Amen. So too, the 23rd Psalm has accompanied our people at occasions such as this, times of mourning and loss throughout the centuries. It presents the vision of a perfect life, a life of comfort and ease and peace.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino deshayar bitzeni, amei menuchot yanchileni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki eilech begeitz al mavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha, shiftecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged tzorirai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, dishanta v'shemen roshi, dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed, yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me to water in places of repose. God renews my life. God guides me in right paths as befits God's name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai for many long years.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Beautiful. Ecclesiastes was an ancient resident of Jerusalem more than 2,000 years ago. His name means the gatherer, one who brought people together, just as Joan has brought us all together this morning. And he, like Joan, lived a long life, and he witnessed all the vagaries of this world, which he put into these words handed down to us. Kol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim, et laledet ve'et lamut, et latat ve'et la'kor natua, et lifrotz ve'et livnot, et livkot ve'et lischok, et spod ve'et rakod. For every single thing there is a season. There's a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. And so speak we shall on this day of Joan Wetzler. Just a few brief words about the arc of her life. She was born in Waterbury here in Connecticut 87 and a half years ago. Her parents were Frida and Bernard Litsky. Interestingly, Frida and Bernard passed on February 7th and February 14th a number of years ago, and Joan's yahrzeit will fall right in the middle of those two dates. She attended public school and then Clark University, where she majored in math and was a competitive swimmer. Then she got her master's in social work and became a social worker starting many years ago here at the JCC in Bridgeport. That's where she met Herbert Rosenblatt, who became her first husband and was the father of her 3 daughters. They moved around quite a bit. First to Norfolk, where Amy was born, then to Savannah, Georgia, where Jody was born, and then to Troy, New York, where Lisa was born. In each place, Herbert was the director of the JCC. Finally, the family moved to Englewood, New Jersey. There, sadly, Herbert died at the very young age of 38 in 1971. Joan met, soon after that sad occasion, Fred Wetzler. They met through her sister Helen, and they got married in 1973. And that's when the family moved to Westport and joined Temple Israel the very next year. Joan continued to be a social worker here in Connecticut, both in private practice and at Norwalk Hospital. She retired in the year 2000. And she loved to spend her time especially playing bridge. She was an extraordinary cook and baker, and she was an amazing grandma. Sadly, Fred passed in 2010, and Joan will be buried next to him here in our Temple Israel Cemetery this morning. She developed a very close relationship in her later years with Walter Sofian. They were partners for about 8 years until his passing in 2021. As Joan's health began to decline, she moved from Westport to the Watermark in 2018, and then her decline became more pronounced, especially in the past year. As the family has noted, her passing was merciful and mercifully swift. It doesn't lessen our grief, but it helps us take comfort that she did not suffer as some do in that final stage. And now I'm very pleased to invite Amy and Charles to the bema.
Thank you for all coming today to help us say goodbye to Mom. I know many of her lifelong family, friends, and neighbors were so saddened to hear of her passing and were unable to attend today, but expressed their sorrow and memories to me, many saying, "She was like a sister to me." I remember her for her knitting. Everyone had to have their own mittens, sweaters, and blankets. It was such a love of hers, but she had to stop knitting much earlier than she wanted due to an arthritic thumb, but wanted to make sure everyone got something before she stopped. I also remember her for her amazing talents as a baker and cook, which she passed down to me and my sisters, Jody and Lisa. Even at the end of her life, after losing her vision and her increasing dementia, she was able to offer advice on how to cook or bake something, what temperature and how long. She was a great bridge player and was quick with wit and quips and sense of humor, and could even laugh at herself when year after year the asparagus got forgotten in the microwave at Passover. How she loved hosting the extended family for all the holidays. It was wonderful for Charles and I that our children, Heather and Ben, got to grow up here in Westport and have her available at a moment's notice, like when Heather got a concussion playing softball in high school, and Grandma was able to get there first. Another example was when we had the Northeast power grid failure in 2003. I was stuck in Philadelphia for work, and Charles stuck underground in the subway in New York City. She was a wonderful sister, aunt, and mother, mother-in-law and grandmother and great-grandmother, and a loving wife. She will truly be missed. Already, I miss speaking to her each night after dinner.
I was so naive when I asked Amy to marry me. Those simple words, mother-in-law, when combined, brought such enormous fear due to the fusillade of jokes and fables instilled in TV and literature. None of the mother-in-law jokes ever made any sense because my mother-in-law was Joan Wetzler. Joan Wetzler had such extraordinary qualities that I was compelled to speak before you today. She was selfless, always putting those around her before herself. She had one of the strongest moral compasses I had ever seen, always adhering to rules set before her, even in the face of others who do not. She was always honest, even to her own detriment. She was kind, even to those who are not. She had unwavering integrity. Joan was an intellect and was exceedingly well-read, voraciously reading as many books as she possibly could, giving her a quick wit and a delightful repartee. Above all, it caused her to be very wise and sensitive counselor to others. She must have been an extraordinary therapist. Clearly, she was an extraordinary friend, given the multitude of friends around her who were continuously complimenting her. It was obvious to me that Joan treated me like a son and not like a son-in-law. How fortunate was I to live only 3 miles away from her for the past 26 years, enabling me to benefit from the largesse of her love and support in raising 2 amazing children. While I find being a parent one of the most difficult, complex, and nuanced things I have ever done, she practiced it effortlessly. Joan found herself a single mother of 3 daughters, under the age of 12 after her husband died, a horrifically formidable position for anyone to find themselves. With pluck and self-determination, she met Fred Wetzler, as we heard through her sister, Helen. When Fred died in 2010, she was fortunate to meet Charlie through J-Date, who was a wonderful soul, but then quickly died of pancreatic cancer. Undeterred, Joan used J-Date again and met Walter Sofian, who we heard enjoyed 8 years until his death only 1.5 years ago today. Joan had enough love for everybody. Joan was always there for us. Not only was there a daily phone call, but there were also countless meals and shared events, including recitals, sports, and award ceremonies. Luckily, Joan was there when Heather, as we heard, suffered her concussion. Joan effortlessly hosted all holidays with amazing cooking, a beautifully set table, and a contagious smile. We always looked forward to her numerous pies, with blueberry being her go-to. Joan's background in math enabled her to become a tireless master of bridge, playing with a speed and agility I had only witnessed in the New York City trains, where the groups of men holding large wads of cash strove to get in as many games as they could before their stop. When not playing in her multiple games during the week, she played online. She also participated in Brandeis Women, attended lectures, and volunteered. I will miss Joan terribly.
And I will miss the daily phone calls. I will miss the meals, blueberry pie, and sage advice. She will forever be a model of ethics and morality as well.
Jody and Scott.
Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to ramble a little bit. I just wanted to share a bunch of different memories of my mom, 7 different categories randomly. She had a lot of sayings, and one of them was, "Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty." Literally, she taught me this while we were baking together. I cracked an egg, and I was about to throw out the shell when she showed me how much more egg was still inside the shell. She said, "Get your hands dirty. Get the most out of life." Her life was full and complex. She had to get her hands dirty. She wasn't dealt an easy hand. It was kind of messy. There was a lot of loss. She outlived her 2 husbands and her late life partner. My dad, Herb Rosenblatt, was her first husband, died in 1971. And at the time, she had 3 daughters, Lisa, age 3, me, age 6, and Amy, age 9. Not a lot of money, a house with a mortgage, a job as a social worker. She kept marching forward and made a nurturing home for all of us. She had to do that hard work. 2, she was a nurturing caretaker with family values. I have such amazing memories of birthday parties with homemade cake and chocolate frosting with dancing ballerinas on top. We always had party dresses, often they were matching. Mom made sure that we each felt special, often roping in our older cousins to help. I remember Cousin Donald performing magic tricks at my birthday party. I was in awe. In fact, my childhood is filled with many memories of my mom, going with my mom to spend time with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Both sides of the family, my dad's side and my mom's side, we are especially doted on by our older cousins, Cynthia and Donald, and Carol and Stephen. My memories of holidays, especially Passover and Thanksgiving, are filled with fun times, playing with cousins, and eating really amazing homemade food. My mother made sure that after our dad died, we were surrounded by family and people that loved us. We were even invited to Florida for a vacation to spend time with cousins I had there that I didn't even know I had. So we didn't feel lacking. My mom, in her nurturing, caretaking way, always welcomed the people into her life that I cared about. She adored my husband, Scott, and our kids, her first grandkids, Hannah and Rebecca. Whenever we would show up, she would just happen to have an apple or a blueberry pie that she had made, knowing especially how much Scott loved the pie. She loved when we visited and never wanted us to leave. She welcomed Rebecca to live with her after Rebecca graduated college. You didn't need to give my mom much notice. You could just show up. Part of my mom's nurturing was making sure there was always homemade desserts. You can hear a lot about desserts. My whole family had a big sweet tooth. Scott tells the story of being initiated into our family when staying overnight after a family birthday celebration. The next morning at breakfast, he witnessed all of us sisters and my mom thoroughly enjoying the rest of that birthday cake. He didn't know that was a thing. 3, my mom always made me feel like my needs were her priority. She cared for me in traditional ways. For example, if I were sick, she'd stay home from work and take care of me. But some ways were more outside the box. There was a time when I was in middle school. It was summer. Lisa stayed at sleepaway camp a few more weeks than I did. So at the end of the summer, Mom and I drove up together to pick her up. Of course, I was in middle school. I hadn't given my mom a heads up that I wanted to get there early so I could see my camp friends one more time. No problem. She just drove like 80 or 90 miles on the highway so that I could have what I wanted. She could be devilish and a risk taker that way, but I'm not sure that other people really knew that about her. 4, she always allowed us kids to have increasing independence as we got older. Maybe it was the time in history before helicopter parenting was a thing. But she let me do what I wanted as long as I showed her that I was responsible. I'd have friends reminding me this week that we spent hours of sleepover times together at my house and theirs. Mom was always kind and welcoming and made sure there was enough food. She was the kind of mom that welcomed all my friends and made them feel valued and safe. In high school, the family had a summer trip planned to the Cape for a week. It turned out that I had to be in Westport for a volleyball camp at that time. No problem. She suggested that I stay home alone and drive the family BMW around. It happened to be a stick shift that I hadn't yet learned how to drive. She trusted me I would figure it out. I had a few friends who were more than happy to help me drive the car as they were allegedly teaching me how to drive it. It all worked out. 5, I always say that I'm the product of 2 social workers. Whenever anyone asked me why I became a psychologist, I explained that I'm the product of 2 social workers. It's in my DNA. But really, that's only part of the story. My mom always took the time to really talk to me. As many parents do, we were often in the car together, and she would ask me about my friendships, discuss relationships, teach me wisdom of how people connect. But most of all, she really listened. I always learned from her, and she made me feel valued, loved, and grounded. She taught me to be strong and independent. I credit my mom with instilling me with achievement values and setting me on the course to have a career path as I went through life, because you never know what's going to happen. 6, go for what you want in life. I love this story. When we lived in Englewood, New Jersey in the late 60s, my parents bought a used and not so well running VW Bug. It needed to pass inspection. As the story was told to me, the inspector got in the car with you at that time. My dad tried. The car failed. He got it fixed and tried again. Failed again. Next up, my mom took control. She put on her skirt and her best attitude, and wouldn't you know, the inspector passed the car. My mom lived her life by going for what she wanted. After her father died, she must have been on a mission to find a husband. I remember how many times we were taken out for ice cream in those days. My mom married Fred 2 years after my dad died. They had over 30 years of happy times together, creating a privileged life for us in Westport, while never losing sight of the family that we already had. A few years after Fred died in 2010, my mom was ready to start dating again. She didn't really know what to do, so she asked me to help her set up an online dating profile. Together, we created her JDate profile. She was 79 at the time, but insisted on saying that she was 75. Through JDate, she met her late life companion, Walter Sofian. My mom and Walter marched through the end of their life together and were inseparable companions. With Walter, our family grew again, as mom and our family were welcomed with open arms by Walter's daughters and family. For Walter and his family, we are forever grateful. And lastly, one of her sayings, if you're tired, sit down. My mom had many sayings. This was one of them. I think of it often when I'm doing too much and I'm tired. Now, Mom, I know that you finally got tired and decided it was time to sit down for the last time. We understand, Mom. We'll love you forever.
And now Lisa and Mark.
Hard to follow. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to say these past days, my mind has been racing with thoughts of my mother, remembering times we shared with each other, times we shared as a whole family, and times she shared with my own family and children. I wanted to share what type of person she was with you so that others could remember her the way that I remember her. My mother was a very strong person. She dealt with many difficult challenges in her life, many of which have been spoken about today, challenges that would have destroyed other people, and she always persevered. Maybe it was because she was so optimistic. Anytime anyone asked her how she was doing, she always answered, "I'm great." And she really thought that she was. She never complained, and she never felt sorry for herself. And she would be content for hours, as long as she had a book to read. Add in some jazz music, and she could make a whole day of it. She loved traveling to tropical places every winter, to sit on the beach with the warmth of the sun on her skin and a swim in the ocean. She liked to garden, growing plants all over the living room and her roses outside. My mom was also an excellent cook, as has been spoken about by everyone so far today. And I will always think of her every time I make pea soup, because that was one of her specialties. She always had a constantly rotating soup pot brimming with homemade soups or her homemade spaghetti sauce that we all loved. I have fond memories of the meals she used to prepare, the Friday night Shabbos dinners with challah and kasha, Jody's favorite, and especially the holiday meals. Thanksgiving was her holiday to host, and I spent days with her in the kitchen as she prepared, and I made her version of the absolute most complicated fruit salad ever. Days to make it. And then I got to repeat the same process for Passover as she spent day after day and dozens and dozens and dozens of eggs making sponge cakes for Seder. But the most important cooking lessons were the baking lessons. And baking back then was baking with Crisco. We baked pies, holiday cookies, and family recipes from my grandmother. We loved making brownies, and the Hamantaschen were a 2-day endeavor because the filling was so involved. But our favorite treat was yellow birthday cake with chocolate frosting. The same chocolate cake everyone has, same chocolate frosting, yellow cake everyone's brought up today. And we learned very early on to guard your frosting because someone would come over and steal it right off your plate. My mother was a compassionate and kind-hearted woman. She cared about others and worried like a good Jewish mother how we were doing. She loved her family and wanted to see us as often as possible. I moved to California in 1998, so it was hard being so far apart for so many years, but we cherished our visits. Mark and I, with our kids, Jamie and MJ, spent many holiday breaks with her in Florida. And I spent time staying with her every summer while my kids were away at sleepaway camp in New York. It was a given that one of our days together would be spent shopping downtown Westport, and she would always find something she absolutely needed from Chico's. Most of the time she'd get home and she already had it. She had bought it twice. Her family was very important to her, from her sisters, who she often spent hours talking to on the phone when long-distance calls were super expensive, her 7 nieces and nephews, her 6 grandchildren, and of course, her 3 daughters. Mom, it's difficult to say goodbye to you. It's heart-wrenching to think that when I come to Connecticut, you will no longer be there for me to visit. But I know you are truly in a better place now. I am happy you are finally at peace and not suffering. We love you.
One sec, I'm sorry. I know the rabbi hates this right now because he said, don't get up there and wing it. But I always wing it. That's the story of my life, and I will be very quick, but I sit here and I listen to the 3 sisters, and I got very emotional. I always get emotional. And I thought about it, and I'm the same age now as Joan was when I met her. Sad to think that it's been so many years, but Joan's been a giver. She was a giver to me from the first day. I didn't know until a year ago that her go-to pie was blueberry pie until Lisa told me, because when I showed up, Joan gave me strawberry rhubarb pie. And I never had strawberry rhubarb pie. And so she made this pie, and we all had it, and I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And she was so happy that I got this amazing reaction from her baking, from her strawberry pie, that I showed up again. And what did she give me? She gave me another strawberry rhubarb pie. And every single time I came, there was always a strawberry rhubarb pie. I had no idea that that was the first strawberry rhubarb pie and that her go-to pie was the blueberry pie. She always gave. She gave me Lisa. She gave me the permission to take Lisa away from the home, the last daughter to leave the home, and with us came the cat. She gave us Alfie because it was Lisa's cat, and Alfie left. And about a week later, after we took Alfie, she called us up, and she said, "We have mice." So we gave her that. Everyone talks about the baking. I just think about Joan as a giver. She's always giving, gave my grandkids a home on the East Coast.
Her grandkids.
Her grandkids, a home on the East Coast. So, Joan, as you always said to us, how's by you? We're doing fine. We love you.
All good, Mark. That was beautiful. Thank you. I want to invite Joan's grandchildren, Heather, Ben, Hannah, and Rebecca, and they will also, of course, be speaking on behalf of their cousins, Jamie and MJ, as well.
Anyone who has been to one of Grandma's seders know that her baked matzo balls, something unusual, are dense and delicious, but with the mountains of other food on the table, you can't possibly eat more than one or two. When Rebecca became a vegetarian, Grandma would make her own batch of baked matzo balls, vegetarian, usually at least a dozen of them. She would spend the evening telling anyone who walked toward the buffet or passed a platter that those were Rebecca's matzo balls and nobody else could eat them. When Hannah first moved into her first apartment after college, she got home from the grocery store and realized that she didn't know how to cook the healthy ingredients in her fridge. She called Grandma, who walked her through a chicken recipe without judgment and passed down a skill that Hannah uses nearly every day.
Heather, too, fondly remembers Grandma's love for baking. Heather loves baking and has great memories of sleepovers at Grandma's house where they bake together. Heather thinks of Grandma every time she bakes, but especially when she bakes peanut butter kiss cookies. For Rebecca, it's thumbprint cookies. For Ben, it's the pies, all the pies. She made the best pie. Jamie, who couldn't make it in person today, also inherited a love of cooking and baking from Grandma and wanted to be a chef when he was little. Don't worry, Jamie, we know Grandma was still proud of you even though you became an engineer instead. In addition to cooking and baking, Grandma passed down many other skills to her grandchildren. She taught me how to sew clothes for my beanie babies and how to knit. She taught Heather and Rebecca the magic inside-out method of putting a pillowcase on a pillow, and she also taught them to make their beds every morning, but that lesson didn't stick.
Sleepovers at Grandma's were always a blast. Heather and I remember a particularly eventful sleepover during the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003. Amy and Charles were stranded, so we stayed at Grandma's instead. During bedtime, she looked high and low for a flashlight and couldn't find it anywhere. After a few minutes of confusion and assuming that a prank was afoot, we pointed out that she'd been holding the flashlight the whole time. We laughed and laughed until our cheeks hurt. It became a lasting memory that we would retell for years to come. MJ, who sadly cannot be here today, writes, "Thank you for always being a kind and compassionate figure in my life. From happily taking me to Stu Leonard's, to playing shuffleboard with me in Florida, to driving me to Brandy Melville. I will always admire, appreciate, and remember your dedication to being in the company of family and adhering to their interests."
For Ben, growing up in Westport, just minutes away, Grandma was a part of his everyday life. It is hard to pinpoint just a memory or two. It was the little things like napping on her comfy blue couch, fixing her finicky Wi-Fi, and swimming in the pool during the summer. Every special occasion, Passover, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, was at her house with the dining room table, kids' table, living room, and kitchen full of food and company. We have lost the matriarch of our family. We will miss baking and eating with her. We will miss her humor and her singing. We will miss her passionate love of elephants. We will miss her giant hugs and greetings of "Hi, sweetie," when we walked in the door. We love you, Grandma. Thank you for these memories and so many others. Memories we will cherish and kindness we will never forget. May your memory be for a blessing.
Thank you. I love hearing these memories, which are so very sweet in more ways than one. It bears noting that Joan's two sisters, Helen and Paulette, are not able to be here with us, but they are with us via the live streams. They're not here in person, but we send our greetings, our love, and our hugs to the two of you. And we're very glad to have Carol here with us, who will share some memories on behalf of her mom and her aunt.
Good morning. Well, Joni was my big sister. Well, that's not really true, but that's how I felt about her, and that's what our relationship was. I annoyed her as much as I could, and she told me what to do, regularly. My parents knew that if I ever ran away, all they had to do was go to Joan's house, wherever she lived, and that's where they would find me. Whether it was long ago when she and Herb first started off in Bridgeport, in Norfolk, in Savannah, in Troy, or in Englewood. I guess by the time Joan moved back to Westport and then back to Bridgeport, I was too old to run away, So my name, as you heard, is Carol Goldberg. Joan was my aunt. My mother, Helen, and Joan are sisters. Helen was the oldest, followed by Paulette, followed by Joan. Joan was the baby of the family. I have to say on my mom's behalf, she just absolutely loved her baby sister. She really wanted to be here today, as did Paulette. And as you heard, they're both watching on Zoom. They would be here if they could have. Up until the last conversation my mother and Joan had, which was really just recently, Helen would say, she would start off, this was just a typical conversation, "Hi, baby, how are you doing?" My mother always ended every conversation with Joan for as long as I can remember. "I love you, baby." Joan remained the baby of the family, even at 87, all of her life. Helen told me the story that she was just so excited when Joni was born. She remembers someone picking her up from the 4th grade, and that alone was a treat because my mother used to walk back and forth to school. So someone else being there to pick her up was like so exciting. But with wide eyes the other day, my mother was telling me, as if it was just happening, that this person came and picked her up at school and said that she had a new baby sister. My mother couldn't wait to see her. No offense, but all she kept saying was, "Oh my God, she was so cute and so chubby and so huggable." And it would tell me all these stories about how chubby she was and how like people couldn't wait to hug her and pinch her and kiss her. So that was the real baby memory that my mom had. Helen remembers that as Joan grew up, she was happy, had a sweet disposition, and was very, very bright. She had a lot of girlfriends, many of whom, to my mother's chagrin, came to the house and ran around making all sorts of noise as they played. Remember, my mom was 8 years older than Joan and much too grown up to play with her baby sister. My mother distinctly remembers that Joan's friends looked up to her because she was so bright. She excelled in math, as you heard, and it seems that many of her grandchildren share her aptitude. She had a great sense of humor. But I have to share with you my favorite stories about Joan's childhood are from when my mother and father and Joan lived together when Joan was a young teenager. My mother and father got married when Joan was maybe 14. They met when Joan was 13 or around that age, and my father fell in love with Joan and Joni fell in love with him. My dad never had a sister, and to him, Joni was his baby, his kid sister. After my parents got married, they moved into my grandparents' home and into my mother's old bedroom. Can you imagine? Just the stories. Joan, of course, was still living at home. I believe Paulette had already gone out, or it was her first year in college, but Joni was living at home, and every night, I'm told, Joan would crawl into bed with my newly married mother and father. My father thought this was the best thing going. He just thought this was great. He would go on and on about how Joni would sit right in the middle of them, and they would talk and tell stories and laugh and share their lives. My parents took Joan to her very first Broadway show. She was 16 years old. They took her out to eat in restaurants she'd never been to before, with types of food she'd never had before. That was the fun part for them. I think the bad part for Joan, or that was the fun part for Joan, I should say. The bad part was my father insisted on meeting every single person she dated. So this tradition, I have to tell you, carried on in that Joan, thereafter, had to meet most of the guys I ever went out with. When Joan and Herb got married, they were wonderfully and thoroughly entwined in our lives. I thought truly I was queen for a day when at Joan and Herb's wedding, she took off her veil and let me wear it during the reception. I was only 4 years old, but I've remembered that feeling my entire life. Joan always made people feel special. Anyone I dated seriously had to meet Joan, but it worked both ways. When she called me at college to tell me, I'd heard about Fred, but, she called me and said, okay, Carol, this is now serious. Remember, this was my big sister telling me this. I got on a bus in Saratoga Springs immediately after hanging up the phone with her, and somehow arrived that very same day in Englewood, New Jersey to meet Fred. I made her promise that she would keep him there until I got there. Much to my surprise, he kindly answered all of my questions during my interrogation. I promise you it was an interrogation. Joan left us alone, took the girls upstairs, and with the twinkle in his eyes that he always had when he smiled, Fred told me of his intentions to marry Joan and be as good a father as he could be to the girls. Now, as I said, the tradition of meeting people we dated back and forth continued. Joan met my husband, Scott, before anybody else in my family did. As a matter of fact, it was at Joan's house, in front of Joan, that Scott asked me to marry him. There are so many wonderful memories. My life and all of our lives are better because Joan was in it. She brought joy and laughter and real wonder to our lives. Most of all, she brought love. She gave love willingly and without conditions. She so loved her children. And well, quite frankly, there was nothing better than her grandchildren, let alone a great-grandchild. So to Joan, I say you were the best. You were a great daughter, a great sister, a great mother, mother-in-law, you've all heard this, a great aunt, grandmother, and great-grandmother. But to me, you were the best big sister I could ever have had. We love you.
What beautiful words have been shared by everyone this morning. Our lives are enriched by all these memories that you've shared and by the depth of love that you've demonstrated for your mother and mother-in-law and grandmother and aunt. Just a few details before we move toward the conclusion of the service here. Following this service, the burial will take place at Temple Israel's Cemetery, 225 Richards Avenue in Norwalk. Anyone wishing to join us there is welcome to join the funeral procession or make your way on your own. Those of you who are familiar with our building and our structure, because we have a pickup for Hebrew school and drop off for the next session of Hebrew school, we're going to be proceeding out the rear exit onto Meadowview, and there's both staff and the police department to direct traffic. So don't be surprised that you're directed out the back, which is not the general traffic pattern today. Following the burial, Shiva will begin. The family will welcome anyone who wishes to join them for Shiva right here in our social hall just behind our sanctuary for luncheon immediately following the burial. Shiva will proceed, or I should say continue, at the Rossoff home, the home of Amy and Charles, at 14 Philo Street here in Westport. There will be a minyan at 5 p.m. this evening, and Shiva will continue at their home Monday and Tuesday from 4 to 8 p.m. with a minyan at 5 p.m. each evening. On Wednesday evening, the Gallons and the Krigsmans will each receive guests at their respective homes in Massachusetts and California. Anyone wishing to make tzedakah donations, charitable contributions in Joan's memory, are invited by the family to direct those contributions here to Temple Israel. And of course, we receive them with wonderful gratitude to all of you. Please rise. In Jewish tradition, we believe that there are two aspects to every human being. There's our physical aspect, our body, which is born and matures and then late in life may decline and fail. And it is Joan's body that is in this casket that will be placed into the ground shortly. But none of you who shared such beautiful words and memories testified to her height or weight or hair color or her eyesight or any of those things. No, you all testified to the beauty of her soul. That's the other aspect of who we are, the far more important aspect of who we are. Our soul is our love and our generosity, our wisdom, our passions, all of the things that make us who we are, but we can't exactly touch them. At the moment of death, body and soul separate forever. Body, as I said, is here with us and will be placed into the ground. Joan's soul dwells with God and dwells within our memories and our hearts. And so with these words of El Malei Rachamim, we ask God to take extra special loving care of the beautiful and dear departed soul of Joan Wetzler, known in our tradition as Tzipa Zelda bat Yosef Berel Ufreda. El Malei Rachamim shochen bamromihim, Hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina, im kedoshihim utohorim, kezohar harakia mazirihim, et nishmat Tzipa Zelda bat Yosef Berel Ufreda, shehalcha le'olamaha. Baal harachamim yastireha b'seter knafahav le'olamihim, vayitzror b'tzor hachayim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkavaha, v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, we ask that you grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Joan Wetzler, known among the people of Israel as Tzipa Zelda bat Yosef Berel Ufreda, who has now entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence and in the shadow of your wings. Let her soul be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. God, you are indeed her inheritance, May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. At this time, we invite the pallbearers, the grandchildren, Joan's grandchildren and her spouses, as well as her niece Carol and nephews Stephen and Donald, to align themselves on either side of the central aisle. Our staff from Abraham Green and Sons Funeral Home will position the casket between you, and you will have a chance to escort the casket out of the sanctuary. Happy are those